Hey, I hear my voice there. Apparently, we're live.
Wait,
This
you're
is
not talking?
this is going to be a delayed after party edition. I'm not going to get too into the formal intro as I tweet out, do the proverbial walk and talk as I have a friend to help me right now, which is cool. Friend of the show, Brad Taschuk at Brazchuck on Twitter, as you can see on the bottom of the screen. I did do that right. And we are here. We're gonna get to this breakdown or recap, I should say. I'm so used to doing breakdowns. It's like, what, we got a week off, Brad. So we're gonna recap some stuff,
Yeah, exactly.
and of course, you know Brad over the MMA analysis. I'm sure you guys usually are pretty good about doing a recap on the off weeks as well. But I'm gonna steal you early, so hopefully your brethren will forgive me.
All my good talking points are going to be delivered here Wednesday night or whenever we end up recording. Who knows what's going to happen?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, yeah. You guys are kind of impromptu as well. The lunatics run the asylum over at your guys' place too, right?
Very much so. Very much so. We've all got lives. We've got things to do. Stuff comes up, and we don't take this too seriously. We're just here to have some fun, as I'm sure that we will this afternoon. And I hope the listeners that tune in enjoy as well.
Absolutely. I hope they do to you as well. Brad, can you say something back to me real quick? I want to check some sound live because it's professional podcasters do it.
Absolutely.
Oh, you sound
How
great.
about
Okay,
this?
cool. You
Okay.
sound fine. You
It,
sound
it felt like
fantastic.
I was a little interrupted for a second, or a little choppy.
I just wanted to bring the beautiful chat and screen, so I got to do it manually here, folks, because I'm not really good with technology, as I'm using some little Ecan Live. Shout out to Aaron Bronstedt, he turned me onto this program. This is how I kind of shoot all my stuff. I just don't do this enough, so this is a good excuse. I think I had another Canadian, Spencer Kite, on last time, who will be making another appearance on a top five show this time this week, which you've done a couple now with me, Brad. So nice to have the Canadian representation in the house.
Can we spoil the topic, or is it confidential at this point?
You know what? This one's actually I can spoil it. Because we're gonna give the teasers as we usually do. I tweet out at Dan Tom MMA or at the PYM podcast on all social platforms. Don't pollute your feed. Very helpful. I usually tweet out the top five topics because we like to get listener interaction. Since I don't usually do these type of shows that often, so it won't be giving it too much away. They're kind of it's real different top fives this week. This one, I think, with Spencer, we're going to be doing top five like dark horses, and we're going to outline that specifically as far as like to get within I don't know if it was like top 10 or within title talk within 2021 a time frame. We'll have that outline for you, but it'll be a little bit more of a shorter time frame episode, but also one you can kind of go and look back and see how right or wrong we were, and you guys can submit your list too as far as how right or wrong you are for your calls for the future. So it's a little bit of different top five than more of like the past ones that we've usually done, Brad.
I mean, it's fun. It's fun though. Anybody who wants to record a podcast or do a video and all the stuff that you do, you're always putting yourself out there a little bit, and it's almost as much fun to be wrong as it is to be right, because then you just get the people that give you shit and think that there's trouble and think they're being witty, and I like to give it right back to them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. If you've bantered with Brad or anybody from their podcast, like I usually tell people, like, don't feed the troll. I'm just kidding. No, no, no. Just you guys are OGs in the game, but obviously, it's so funny because, and so many of the people I get along with, it's not a criticism. Like, shout out to the Fight Site guys. They have their own language. Although you guys differ on the Russians, but you guys have your own language of like sarcasm, where like no matter what friends group is on Twitter, because y'all are so spread out there, it's like you gotta like transcode the sarcasm. But you guys make for some of the funniest jokes and listens to. So that's why I was that's why I always give you guys a shout on this year's show, and appreciate you coming on mine, man, because we could use more comedy right now. This show could, especially. So I'm gonna cheat code it and bring on my man Brad and break down a fun night. We're gonna go top to bottom as usual as people pile into the chat. Feel free to shoot your questions in there. We will address it. Ron Burgundy will read what's on the prompter, unfortunately. So you have that edge on me, on paper edge. But I got Brad here to help me, man. So we'll keep to like the usual format, air quotes, for a show where the lunatics run the asylum. But yeah, we're gonna go from top to bottom here. And yeah, man,
Before we start, though,
yeah,
before we start,
good.
Dan, we're savages, man. We're savages.
Savages. I know, man. Shout out to Whiskey Sour and all the usuals, by the way, man. We all joke about the MMA betting community. We do. I know you guys do, Brad, but we are the MMA betting community, so we're the pie's on our own face too. So as long as you can laugh at yourself, you should be okay in this game, folks. I think that's a good rule of thumb to always keep in mind. But shout outs to the hardcores and the savages out there, of course. The Protect Your Neck podcast. Like the video, by the way. Subscribe, Daniel Tom MMA, if you're listening to the audio version, as this will be, in the future, talking to people in the future here, because this will go audio last. Whereas usually, YouTube's getting, the slow upload, and you guys are seeing me last on here for my breakdown shows. But yeah, this little thing called UFC 260 broke down. I actually have a tab here with some results, which is pretty crazy. Like, I'm prepared all of a sudden. But no, of course it was supposed to be headlined by 2 title fights. We didn't get Volkanovski versus Ortega. Who did you have for that? Did you have a pick, Brad? Do you mind sharing if you did? I didn't.
I feel like my first instinct was going to be Ortega, but that's probably just me looking at it and seeing a decent dog number beside a very good fighter's name, and then maybe looking for reasons that I might have wanted to bet it. But Volkanovski is one of the most complete fighters out there. I don't necessarily think he's as exciting as some others do, but hard to argue with the results, right?
Yeah, I think that Ortega fight would have brought the exciting out of him. Maybe we could have seen that counter right hand come back to life, which, not to be that guy, although I kind of did in the main event, which we'll jump to in 1 second. But I did see Ortega with, coincidentally enough, a bunch of bruising in all his interviews through training camp under that left eye. So maybe they were doing their best to prepare for that right hand that Volkanovski, I think, would have to dust off for an aggressive fighter like Ortega. But we'll save that if that fight happens again, right? Which apparently is soon because, COVID's something you can just turn around from like that, apparently. So we'll see how that goes. But hey, man, at least it did not affect the heavyweight main event. That would have really been a crying shame for both how long Francis Ngannou has been waiting, regardless of what your thoughts are on the heavyweight title picture, and regardless of what your thoughts are on Stipe. The fact is, he didn't fight that much, especially toward the end of his career. So I think it would have been a double heartbreaker, really, even if this was the fight instead that got lost, despite the hardcores and the technical nerds, of course, standing for Volkanovski Ortega. But thank goodness this happened, and
Wow.
This was wow. I mean, I know. I think we technically had different picks here, Brad, but I don't think our analysis was too far different. You know what I'm saying? I think we were pretty level-headed about it. Even though I picked Ngannou, and I'm incredibly happy for Ngannou and Eric Nicksick, and we'll get to that in a second. It's not like I had a fairly accurate read, but it's not like I can sit here and say that there was no worry, because I'm not going to go back on my words. I still stand by my previous words, written and otherwise, which is I still think that opening line of north of a 2-1 favorite was disrespectful to Stipe. And I still don't blame, even after the fact, obviously they were losing tickets, I don't blame people for taking any of the many plus money angles, but that chalk comes through, man, and Ngannou does what many of us thought, even if you pick Stipe. I think, there was a fair amount of us that were really worried for Stipe, whether you picked him or not the first time. Ngannou does what many of us feared that first time, or picked for him to do that first time. Any thoughts the day after as we're nursing hangovers, Brad?
You know what? This was, quite frankly, a much better performance than I expected. I thought that Ngannou's path to victory was coming out there, blitzing, and getting the knockout. And that's just not the way it turned out. There were a lot of people that were picking Ngannou, and I was in the back of my head just thinking, yeah, I get it. You're coming up with all these reasons and trying to rationalize your pick, but just say he's going to knock him out. That's what you think is going to happen. You think he's going to knock him out, but even in the semi-prolonged nature of the fight, we actually saw the improvements that everyone was hoping for out of Ngannou. He fought the more patient fight, did it successfully. Didn't freak out after he landed that big right into the temple in the first round. I thought that he might have gone in and swarmed didn't freak out after he switched up the wrestling on Stipe, something that I know you hinted that might happen in that fight. And I just kind of laughed it off. I'm like, oh, Dan, that's come on. I know you like Nixick and Extreme Couture and all your guys over there, but come on, he's not gonna like out wrestle Stipe and get that advantage on the ground. But man, he did all of those things, and the finishing sequence, aside from the violent part of it, again, hats off to you. You're being pretty modest in your post assessment of the fight, but you called for the check left hook, and that was the punch that it didn't start the sequence, but it was the one that finished him and put Stipe on his ass and put him out before he got extra put out. But that finishing sequence was pretty incredible, because a lot of people probably missed it just because of the end result. But Stipe landed that same sort of like pullback counter right, and I think he rushed in because he thought that he had Ngannou hurt like he did in the first fight, but Ngannou had the answer, and whew, what an answer.
Absolutely. And to clarify on the check hook, half and half right, I thought that it would be something that we would see more of Stipe, because he doesn't throw it that much. He's kind of like Junior Dos Santos, where they actually tag people, and like JDS obviously dropped Stipe in their first fight, which was really crucial for this, I believe, for the turnaround. But they don't throw it until they're tired and like really pressed. And I felt like those are the shots, like guys with chins, whether it's Yves Edwards on Jeremy Stevens, or early on, being the first person to stop Jeremy. It's those check hooks. They don't look like they're there a lot. But when you have a guy that big, at that big of a weight, I feel like they're extra emphatic. I thought that could be something for Stipe, but he ended up getting hit by it. But where I said the left hand for Ngannou is that was essentially the narrative broken down in the first one. I picked Ngannou both times, folks, and essentially it was similar to why I picked Reem against him, is because Reem was fighting more from southpaw, which we saw Ngannou do, against Blades when he fought wrestlers. He would switch southpaw, and overall through Stipe's career, yes, he gets finished by the right hands by Struve or Cormier, but it's left hands that have hit him at a way more disproportionate rate. So, of course, going into the first fight, everybody's like, "Ooh, power puncher Ngannou, it's all about the right hand." But if you look at Ngannou, he switches stances and he's really fluent with the lead or as a power, but he's fluent with the left. The left conducts all the traffic, opposite of like a TJ Dillashaw who conducts the traffic with the right. His stances are switching, but he's conducting traffic with the right hand. So that was kind of my math there, which ends up playing here. I guess I did say that was still going to be live, so I wasn't wrong there, but I did say that my tinfoil hat theory, Brad, you can tell me what you think, because you highlighted that right hand. And whether it was the right or the left, I just feel like Stipe wasn't seeing shots coming that well. I felt like it was a continuation of what I saw from the Cormier fight, where we heard really loud eye poke, supporters going, "Hey, Stipe lost the first fight because of the eye poke. He gets poked in the left eye, knocked out by the right hand. Coincidence?" But it was weird. Even those people kind of dropped that narrative when I thought it only became more relevant, because he suffered eye pokes to that same eye in every fight. And the last half of the trilogy, like I cite in my breakdown, literally every meaningful right hand that's like even kind of in a coughing range, like he was getting hit by. And like that first right hand hits him, then a flurry kind of happens shortly after with the failed takedown and whatnot, right? And by the time Stipe gets back to his feet, you can see that his eye's kind of having trouble with he's having trouble with that same eye, kind of like fighters like Jessica Penne, who was supposed to fight when they come off of nose surgeries. I always tell you MMA gamblers to be careful. Sometimes they don't come off the same. It just takes a jab, or Koscheck, right? After that GSP fight, every time he got jabbed, he was like, "Oh, let me check that eye," right? It sticks with you. And I saw Stipe doing that.
Another guy we'll talk about later, Almeida, had an eye surgery, and since he's come back, little more hesitant.
Very great point. Yeah, but and not trying to pat myself on the back. I'm usually not a tinfoil hat guy, Brad, but I would argue maybe there was something there. I mean, everyone was saying Stipe didn't look the same, or he looked shook, or it was the wars with Cormier, and there could be arguments for any of those. I'm not going to pretend. That's very subjective, and so is my theory. But I just felt like he wasn't seeing the shots coming like from the start before he was hurt.
Yeah, it didn't look great. I think that's why he rushed in so quickly when he landed that one counter, because he was like, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen now. the rest of the fight just simply wasn't going his way. He wasn't finding any openings for his offense, so he tried to take the one and just wrong time. And like I said, Ngannou had that answer for him, which was emphatic. But let's the other thing that people are talking about is Stipe's leg after the fight. And that just tells me that a whole lot of people haven't seen Cro Cop Gonzaga.
That was poetic. I didn't realize that. Like, it didn't look as nearly as bad as, and I'm not. I mean, hopefully he's okay. I'm not saying he didn't get hurt from, it, but it didn't look nearly as bad as Cro Cop's. But that was just like, I saw someone quote like somewhere in like Zagreb, Croatia, Mirko is screaming.
Yeah, I guess that would have been what 6 o'clock in the morning in Croatia when that was happening. So
imagine they
shot out of bed in a cold sweat.
Imagine if they still let him wear the pants, because Stipe used to wear the tribute shorts. Remember that?
Yep. Yeah, that's that would have been a little bit too on the nose, I think.
So Aaron B, I'm going to go comment down. This kind of jumps like toward the opposite end, but I can parlay this into what we're talking about because it'll parlay into commentary. Excuse me, coffee, a little digestion this morning, folks. Aaron B says, can't believe you recommended that big chalk play on Anik saying Malaki with a Boston accent. Lost my shirt on that one. I made the mistake of, well, the fight was short, but I think that it wasn't going to happen. I feel like John was purposely not saying it because I made the mistake of tagging him. I didn't want to be that guy that tags him, especially because, like, people more in the public eye, like, if you're not clear with your joke, it could be taken the wrong way. I'm like, I hope John doesn't take it the wrong way or anything. But it's hilarious because on his podcast, like he does it, and then if you watch tape, I guess that's why the people who like that kind of got my joke. It was because he goes, Jimmy Malaki here, and like Anik will do that from time to time, kind of like my favorite Bill Burr, and it'll even bleed on old here on this show, right? So I appreciate it. I love everything, Boston, no offense, Brad. I don't know if that you got to be anti-Bruins if you're a Canadian, no matter what region you're from. But I got love for all things Boston. So I apologize for that. I would have lined it though, seriously, like -7, or 9, whatever. But hopefully there wasn't a play on that, Aaron. But I appreciate that shout. Before I jump to the next,
Aaron, the spreadsheet, because the spreadsheet said Malaki round 1 and. He paid for some car detailing for me today, so that's good.
I've heard you reference these things before, Brad, on your podcast, and it's just like you said, you haven't been doing them for a while, but you sent me these spreadsheets you do for kind of to get a better idea as far as round betting results and have a nice visual aid for when you're looking to place your, take your stabs, especially if you're like a prop guy, like Brad is here, where we will recap some betting stuff as well. But yeah, but that was awesome, man. Props to you on that for putting that together.
Yeah, it's fun. If you're gonna spend time doing this, I'm not into the technical breakdowns quite like you are. I can pick up a couple things, but for the most part, I just go from memory when I'm breaking down fights. But to see those trends, because they're not really laid out well when it comes to MMA. So you can look at UFC stats or fight metric or whatever they're calling it these days, but it really doesn't give you a true sense of how good a fighter is, because you don't know where the fight took place or the level of competition or just how that matchup interplayed. But when you're looking at the actual results, you get a real sense for how fighters win and lose. And that can be a huge help in terms of picking some of those spots, which normally I need because I can't pick a fight to save my life.
Well, I appreciate the kind words, but like we talk about a lot of times, I think why we get along, I think without sounding, too homoerotic here, we fill in each other's spots quite well, if I do say so myself, sir. Because I'm very blind to the props and the round bettings, and I've been really bad about that. I used to even, shout out MMA Gamblers, D Love. Shout out, by the way, to Derek Love. And before I get to speaking MMA Gamblers, Chronic Combat Conversations comment as I work my way down, just to, we'll get to more malarkey talk. Don't worry, Mark Fellows. I see you in the chat. My Australian brother, he's probably sculling one right now. I probably got that wrong, but forgive me. Either way, commentary was the segue there, despite it being about malarkey. Maybe like kind of, we had some jokes off the top of the show. I can't even remember if they were on air or off air. I can't even remember. I barely remember that we went to a round 2 with Ngannou Miocic. That was just so high off that, right? But maybe it was like Thick Willie being off the card and Menafield, which we'll get to, finishing his fight fast, Brad. But, you know, even guys like me had some leftover BDE energy left over. I'm rocking my Nasty Nate shirt today. I'm stoked, you know. But Rogan, man, I felt like, you know, maybe because they knew that the fight was going to go fast, but he went right into those muscles need oxygen narrative, and I was loving it. I was loving it because you can feel it. And I love Rogan, but you feel the timeline collectively go, oh shit, here we go.
Yeah. Well, he didn't do it for Woodley at all because Woodley got into the fight too quickly. You know, there was stuff happening there, so he didn't have the chance to ogle those thighs. So he had to get it in for Ngannou, but we'll get there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that though. That was a shot. You gotta learn to appreciate these and make it into your own like drinking game, if you will, folks. Because MMA, the parts that are predictable is usually stuff like that. Let me tell you, it's not it's not
stuff that happens inside the cage, stuff that happens outside the cage.
Hey, and you know what? I know DC and Rogan, especially going into podcast mode, or you know Rogan, and I think there was a moment which we'll get to the post-fight interview where Rogan almost kind of, you know, he doesn't help himself in these arguments, right? Because he'll bring up stuff like in the post-fight when he's standing alone and he doesn't have the facts right. Like Jan, he's like, Jan Blachowicz, you were middleweight, right? They're like, nah, I was never middleweight. But I gotta say, man, I you know, whether it's like, you know, commentary or UFC related stuff, like we're all so quick to like throw this or that. I felt like, you know, aside from some moments which we'll talk to, which are great. I'm not, you know, condemning anybody. I felt like they did a really good job. Anik always kills it. I love Anik, man. He's the man. But I felt like even like, you know, DC and Rogan, everybody, like they weren't too out there. I mean, we'll talk about some stuff as we get to it, but you know, compared to other pay-per-views.
I think you might have to carry that conversation for the most part because for the last few cards, I've been doing some Zoom calls and stuff with the boys from the podcast. So a lot of times don't really hear what's going on with the commentary, which isn't such a bad thing.
That was me with the last couple of them too, so I couldn't get into it. You know, obviously, I think we were on some of the same things. In fact, right with the spaces. Shout out to Aaron Bronstetter for that. So I'm going to break it down to chronic combat conversations because some of these aren't Ngannou Stipe. So we'll finish out with the comments as we move our way down. And I believe that's MMA Guru and TB Scouting on Twitter. Shout out to those guys. What a great way to call how you could see the improvements from Ngannou and the newly susceptible chin of Miocic. I'm just as upset for Miocic as I am happy for Ngannou. Thanks for the awesome content. Too kind. I did mention the leg kicks there, but not just because of the Dos Santos sample size, but Cormier actually landed in the 90th percentile through the entirety of the trilogy until he got lost headhunting. So it was nice to see that, like especially to hear like, and shout out to Ryan Wagner. I jokingly tweeted like, somebody go check on Ryan Wagner MMA. He's body punching.
First punch was a body punch.
Right, and because fight site, and that's a joke on not on Ryan or not even just a fight site. It's myself too. That's why I get along with those guys. We tend to kind of joke about heavyweight MMA, not in the same way as T-shirt in the pool contest guy over here does, but as far as the technical skills, heavyweights tend to get a bad rep. So they were just like, I remember Ryan was like, you know, and Stipe could maybe body punch, but this is heavyweight and that's a bit too much to ask. So it was a kind of a comment on that. However, Ryan Wagner, who is a fantastic analyst, knows you can break down wrestling to Muay Thai to a bunch of stuff better than I. Go follow him at Ryan Wag MMA. Does make me comfortable, and a guy familiar with Art of Eight Limbs was also saying pre this fight that Ngannou has gotten better at throwing leg kicks quietly in the small sample size, and I think we saw that kind of that measuredness you were speaking to, Brad. That a lot of leg kicks were mixed in there.
Do you think it played a huge impact in the fight though? Because like I know he landed a couple decent ones, but I think it maybe helped him establish his range a little bit. But other than that, I don't think like leg kicks right now in late 2020 and 2021 are probably the most oversold technique in MMA. But I think as a range finding tool that really helped him establish his distance. But other than that, not a huge impact in the fight.
I thought it could have been, but yeah, after what we saw, I don't think that was like a deciding factor or anything. Like, you know, I feel like Poiriers and McGregor's had more of an effect, and I know me and you have been, you know, traditional haters of that narrative, not denying it, but just kind of bringing up the stuff that's not really mentioned with that. I feel like it obviously had even less of an impact here, to your point. That being said, I did bring it up in the pre-breakdown as a more of a measuring thing, which we'll talk about Perhaps a play and a pick that I really just biffed on Azatar, where when you want if you're worried about measuring your gas tank and you're facing a pressure fighter, just something MMA guys don't do enough in general, which is attacking to the body and leg, but using the body and leg to dissuade said pressure. See Eddie Alvarez versus Justin Gaethje, right? It's not gone to enough. So. I thought, tools like that for a fighter, like whether it's an Ngannou or you're worried about their gas tank, right? You're like, easy. Like, you want to see them incorporating measured attacks. Not because it's going to maybe, change the result of the matchup on its own, but it'll give them offense and give them some breathing room to set up the more fight-ending shots, right? So...
Yep. And gives the opponent more stuff to think about, because that was the most diverse attack that we've ever seen from Ngannou in any of his fights.
Yeah, I mean, body work, single leg sprawls, reshot. I mean, it was fantastic. Daniel Mays says, "I agree, Brad. This is far and away the best Ngannou's ever looked. The combo in round 1 he got Stipe with is the best thing I've seen him throw." I agree. I think he's referring to, was it the jab, body jab over the top, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Great call. Great shout there, Daniel Mays.
Although, for the Ngannou backers, when you saw him land that punch and Stipe didn't flinch at all, there was probably some clenching that happened at that particular moment.
Yeah, I mean, because that was the thing, right? I think that was people, and not saying they were wrong. Those people cashed their tickets, but that was the argument they had, right? Which is like 311 shots or whatever was the number being thrown around. Stipe can't take one, and so when he takes one, yeah, like I'm sure there was some clenching going on. I know a lot of people that bet that were on the Ngannou side that were, I got to imagine they felt some of that. MMA KO says that short right put Ngannou into finishing mode. The one that Stipe
I think he's talking about
on.
The one from Stipe, yeah.
Yeah, man, it was crazy. It was almost like a drunken master. Like he looked rocked, so I don't blame Stipe for going in. Then he just snapped right back into the left hook, and then and if you look, there's a screenshot out there. Like Stipe was off of his feet when he got caught, so he got caught in midair, like swatted out of the air. Like that's insane. MMA KO also says go check out his channel. He puts together videos. What's up? Go ahead, Brad.
For all the improvements that we saw from Ngannou in that fight, one of the things that was of a bit of concern was his footwork. And I think that you kind of saw in that last exchange that the footwork isn't necessarily all the way there, because that's what made it look like he was rocked to Stipe, I think, more than anything. Because obviously he landed a bit of a shot, but Ngannou was sort of like tripping over himself at that point to try and close in and land something. But there's still work to be done, obviously. But hey, when you're the heavyweight champ, and as terrifying as that man is, it's okay to have some room for improvement, right?
You know what? Yeah, and if anything, if he can move and scramble, to sprawl out the shot, spin off the cage, and then sprawl around to the back, and wedge himself in between Stipe and the cage to get to those hips. It looked like a couple of lightweights in there, which has traditionally been Stipe's advantage. So if that guy can learn to do that stuff, I'm sure he can refine the footwork for his favorite striking. MMA KO also says those checked leg kicks sounded brutal on Stipe's tibia. His defense was on point all around. I got to go back to watch that. I didn't catch that, but good on him. I know he tried to be better at checking in recent fights. Steve Gregory, I believe that's your guy from the MMA analysis there. He said
Steve's awesome. Hilarious.
Yeah, Steve's a very funny guy on Twitter. He says Wineland the same after breaking his jaw. Yeah, I think he was talking about our injury talk, right?
The eye poke.
Yeah. These are things to kind of keep in mind for past injuries. It's in your head, man. I mean, even a low level unathletic dummy like me, after I messed up my knees, and I'd go back in. It took me a while before I was comfortable, putting a hook in. Even when someone was giving me a weak turtle, it was like, oh, but what if this guy turns the wrong way? Like, there's this mental thing. I can't imagine you're at the high level, making your money with this nonsense. So completely forgivable, but something you got to also account for if you're trying to watch this stuff with a critical eye.
Having a facial injury of any sort in a sport where you get punched in the face, probably a bit of a disadvantage.
Yep. And then MMA KO adds, good thing his leg didn't go full Tim Means. Oh, that was a bad one, man. I didn't catch that live when I saw the replay. I was like, I feel like Tim Means, it's like he's got like it's all like calcified cankle. If you look at that ankle now too, he's just lugging it around.
We'll get to ankles as well.
Oh
later on in this
yes,
card.
yes
What
we
do we
will.
think?
Uh,
What do we think's next on
com-
the horizon? Is it going to be Bones, or is it
oh, it's good. Yeah,
for the belt?
I think that judging by the way Dana's already talking, where he's already doing his classic line. He goes, "Hey, everybody says they want to fight, but do they really want to fight?" And he said it just like that too. I'm like, oh fuck, here we
Oh, of
go.
course.
John Jones not getting any money, so which sucks because you don't have to be a John Jones fan. Like the guy should deserve to be paid
John
for
Jones.
that. He deserves to be paid for that. You know what I'm saying? You look at the financial breakdown. All these fighters deserve to be paid more. So that no argument from me there. So I really hope the UFC does because I had my early analysis article that I went back and read that I wrote in May of last year. It kind of holds up a lot of those predictions as well. And we saw, a lot of the optimistic part of those predictions play through the Ngannou part, where I have my own theories on Jones. Not to discredit him at all, but I would favor Ngannou in that fight before. I still would favor him after, and it looks like the betting line moved up a whole $1 for like the fantasy of that fight. I don't know. What do you think of that fight, Brad?
It's tough. I think this could be one where it actually the cage size makes a difference. I know they were talking about it a little bit in reference to this fight, but if you give Jones the freedom of the bigger cage, I think we could see a very boring fight between these two. A lot of Jones, because he's possibly the smartest fighter ever in terms of in-cage performance. He doesn't want to get into exchanges with Ngannou, so we're going to see lots of oblique kicks, and he's probably added calf kicks to his game and all sorts of things like that. So I think there's a lot of Jones trying to poke and prod from the outside or be all the way inside and maybe go back to some of those Greco roots.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. I didn't think of that because I could totally see it being, just kind of a counterfest, and Jones is really good at lulling opponents into false senses of security that they're either doing well or not doing well. So that's actually a really good point, and that would probably be, I think, a really juicy betting angle if this thing goes to the betting the big cage. You could get some angles where maybe you don't need a side, right?
Yeah. Honestly, like I'm looking right now, plus 175 on John Jones at any point. I feel like I have to bet that if that's what the line is come fight time. I probably favor Ngannou, especially with those improvements that he's shown. But again, he's going up against a historically durable guy. If that Jones fight comes to fruition, going up in weight tends to only help guys' chins. So Jones might be even more durable than he normally is. And as I said, even in fights where he doesn't look good, which has been a lot of his performances over the last few years, always finds a way to win. So give me that guy at plus 165, plus 175 that I'm seeing at the moment. I would be very tempted. We'll say that.
Yeah, that's the thing is that's the trappings for me is whether I pick these guys or not. I also feel like the value is on the other side. We're getting the sitting champ for plus money. We'll get the Stipe here in a second before we push on. Or like you said, when do we see Jones at plus money? I believe it was like Stefan Bonner was the last time he's been anywhere near the opening odds, at least that he was for the Ngannou fantasy fight. So that is definitely interesting there. But speaking of Stipe, as before we push on and staying in this theme, where does Sweet Bro Stipe, Sweet Bro version of Viggo Mortensen, as I tweeted out. I've been tweeting this for years, by the way, but I think Stipe, he lost a bit of the roundness in his face, and this is a guy with a round face here, believe me. I'm not coming at him, just saying. I think because he got slimmed out, he grew the Hollywood hair. People are finally starting to see, even Laura Sanko shouts to her, she cannot unsee now that Viggo Mortensen is, Stipe Miocic's doppelganger.
Yeah, although I have to say, when he was walking out and he had the hat backwards and all that, for a second I thought it was fellow Canadian Paul Shaughnessy that was he shaved down, and I thought he was walking out to the cage for a second. So I was a bit confused there, but it was Stipe, I'm glad it wasn't Paul in there.
Shouts to Paul and CJ in their show, man. That's a great show. I never put that. I can see that too. You gotta go check out their show to see what Brad's comparison is, though. No, that's great. What's next for Stipe? As we were just sitting here clowning on what the guy looks like. poor Stipe, man. Poor Stipe.
I hate to say it, but retirement. Like he can definitely beat guys. He can beat probably any other than Ngannou and Jones in the heavyweight division, and even then he can beat those guys. But getting older, he's kind of he's committed to his career, obviously, but he's not tethered to MMA in the way that a lot of fighters are. So I think that if he feels like he doesn't have anything more to accomplish, this could potentially be the last time we see him, although, it's MMA, so probably not.
Yeah, and hopefully it's not, but if my speculation is right and the vision's not there and you just take a KO loss from Francis Ngannou, the promotion doesn't seem to be too friendly or eager to do you any favors to get back to those money fights, which is why like the Bispings of the world stuck around, right? Because the title picture was still there. If it's not, man, to put yourself through that, plus like you said, you got the firefighting gig and whatnot, and I'm sure he still made some decent money. Although of course all these fighters deserve more. I wouldn't be surprised. We'll see what happens there, but yeah, I do hope Stipe still gets his respect though in the history books. For his defenses and his time at the top. I think he was a fine champion. I know the inactivity and that last trilogy was we wanted to see some things move on, but there could have been a lot of things behind the scene there. Again, if the eye thing was a fact, that could have been it too. Couldn't have just been politics or negotiating, which, again, these fighters need all the leverage they can. So I don't blame him for that, man, and I just hope he gets his respect due still.
If he does stick around, who do you think is next?
I think they give him a really... I think they give him Curtis Blades, the Island of Misfits match of two guys that can just knock off their contenders. And they don't necessarily want them to be champions. So, and it's a tough matchup because I would never accuse UFC matchmaking of deliberately leveraging certain feelings in the form of their matchups. But I could see some, I could see them giving them a tough matchup like that, and then going, Derek Lewis. Using Derek Lewis or using Stipe as a negotiating ploy, but then just giving it to Derek Lewis as far as, trying to entrap John Jones into taking the fight at the do you want to fucking fight level of money. So we'll just say that. I mean, just being honest here. That's the truth, right, folks? I don't know.
Well, people hate John Jones. I like to compliment John Jones when I can. He's also become quite the... as far as relative MMA fighters go, he is a significantly large step ahead in terms of his business savviness.
He is. He is very much, man. He's ahead in a lot of things. The cheating meta in MMA, fouling while you're ahead. This guy's been fouling while he's ahead since Matt Hamill. He reminded us like. Anthony Smith, Peter Yan and Eric Anders and, all these other guys that want to, come late to the fouling while you're ahead meta in MMA. They're reviving it, but John Jones created it, folks.
Been here for decades.
All right. As we move on, Mark Fellows, Brad Taschuk enjoying a beer? I like this guy. Are you having a beer right now?
Of course.
I'm so jealous. I'm just drinking this coffee.
I had a couple coffees earlier,
well,
but
different time zones. It's much more excusable for you. Yes.
I mean, your afternoon on a Sunday. Come on, there's nothing wrong with beer.
I'm going to read two more before I go to the co-main event here, because one's a compliment to you again from MMA KO. MMA Analysis, one of the most underrated and entertaining MMA podcasts. Look at that. Getting shouts in the chat there. Yeah. And then MMA KO also adds, because this was relevant, so I'll use this and move on. He goes, so Jan, as in Jan, Jan, not Peter. So Jan, how did it feel moving up from flyweight? That's great. I can't remember what it was, so I'll probably forget to bring it up later, but it was one of the post fights, probably further down in the card, Brad, where Rogan was like excited and he was bringing up something and he brings up a fact, but you could tell he kind of like overstepped himself, so he wanted to fact check. But he didn't have like the crew next to him because of the COVID. He has to like walk to a different area to do it. So like you see him turning and yelling to the booth. He goes, "Right, guys? Is that right?"
Well, there was something. I don't think it was the same situation, but like Anik yelled some fact to him from across the room, just to correct him in terms of like how many wins the guy had or something like that. And I think it was Metafield. He was like 4 wins now in the UFC or something. It was pretty hilarious.
Yeah, because he's so enthusiastic. I mean, that's why Joe is Joe, right? Because he's got that enthusiasm. You can't question that. But when you don't do the prep, the enthusiasm can betray you. It starts leading you, starts taking the train off the tracks, and he's like, "Well, where's the tracks, guys?" That's why Anik's the man. Like he does, and it's good of a play-by-play guy because they had to play dumb, but they're really so smart. A lot of these guys like train like good, and you wouldn't know because they're playing dumb and setting up their color commentators to look good. So Anik's always quietly doing the Lord's work there. But man, I don't want to make a segue off. We'll just say Tyron Woodley lost by Bravo choke. Round 1, that was 4 minutes of fun, was it not? Were you on heavy on the Luque side like me? And even though money seemed to come in on Woodley, and you can't say they were wrong for hoping because Woodley came out and fought, man. He say what you will, he came out and fought, but that was crazy. Brad, what's your thoughts on this one?
If you backed Tyron Woodley in this fight, you got everything you could have hoped for and more. Because you were hoping he lands the one big shot, or he tries to wrestle, or any number of things that he's shown to have success with throughout his career. And he did them all, and it still wasn't quite enough. And I think that's just a factor of him being 38, 39 years old, been in this game quite a while, especially lately, taken a lot of damage. So I think the physicality isn't quite there. A lot of people pointed out that he looked a little bit smaller on the scales, even though he looked fine in the cage. I mean, if I could look like Tyron Woodley, I would be all over that. Maybe except for the parts missing due to raccoon attacks, but. Other than that, I would be quite happy to look like T Wood. But man, honestly, great performance from him. Didn't get the win, obviously, but Luque brings those kind of fights out of people, and that's why we've been fans of Luque for quite a while. And finally, he got one of those rare fights that. A mid to lower ranked guy at welterweight can get to break into that upper echelon, because those dudes have there's been a glass ceiling on like anybody ranked below 8 or so in the welterweight division for years now.
Yeah, it's been wrestleweight too in that division. So like to have a guy like Luque who he looks like he's getting his wrestling better, but we need that kind of Du Bronx character that has a mean front headlock game that can kind of scare you away from it, right? And welterweight, maybe we thought Warley Alves might have been that guy early, but we haven't really had, that guy, at least off the top of my head, and I feel like Luque could fit that bill. And the funny thing about Woodley, about the raccoon thing, is like he has looked lighter in the last 2 performances, and it looks like he's had an easier time making weight. I'm not saying those 2 things are correlated, but, you guys don't use the tape measure over tape study for nothing on your show. But let me bounce it to Luque really quick. Our guy there, Luca Fury, shouts to him. I saw him of one of the opinions, which is interesting. I'm always all for the not so much contrarian opinion, but something that other people aren't necessarily saying. And I saw him pointing out that it's a fun fight and all, and we can talk about Woodley, and that was great that he tried and really came out and went on his shield, but. He was kind of criticizing Luque for it, as far as you had one job. Watch out for the right hand. You had one job. And a guy who has never been stopped before, which is why people like us bet him and like him. Man, I will give Woodley credit. I think he might be the closest person to stopping him in the UFC like that.
Well, I think that's a justifiable point, saying that you had one job, look out for the right hand. You got to give Woodley some credit, because the very first massive right hand that he threw after their like minute and a half in the clinch was that looping right hand, the overhand right. But then the one that he landed immediately after that, he switched it to a straight right, which is like, I didn't even know that Tyron Woodley's arms could extend straight. So he made adjustments in this fight, and that was the best version of Woodley that we've seen, maybe even throughout his title run, honestly, because that dude, if he came out and fought Stephen Thompson or something like that, I think he could get a bunch of those guys out of there that he put on some lackluster fights against, Mayas and everyone of the world. But yeah, it's there were definite improvements from Woodley. So Luque is hittable. We know Luque is hittable. But he does have a great chin, and that he's going to drag you into that kind of fight that he's comfortable in.
Yeah, absolutely, and that was great for Luque. I think he called out Nate Diaz, which is always a popular guy to call out. Obviously, I don't think that's going to probably happen, but I do hope on that note that Luque gets the boost, that proverbial rub, if you will, from taking out the Raccoon Man, Woodley himself, and Jesus, he's a former title champ. Can I at least give him that respect? I'm sorry, folks, I can't get that out of my head. But hopefully he gets some rub from that, and can get himself a nice matchup going forward. Any thoughts on the futures for both these guys, Brad?
Ooh, haven't really looked at the welterweight rankings, but I don't know. Luque, I know he's got a loss to Leon Edwards many moons ago. But if Edwards is still running scared from Bilal, then Luque versus Edwards would be interesting, and it's sort of that alternate path to the title where it's not, because I still think if you put any of these guys up against like Colby, Colby's probably going to win that fight. So I think getting a couple of secondary contenders into a fight, I think you can boost one of them up into a title shot from something like that. And let's be honest, Usman's not drawing a ton of eyeballs anyway. So his B-sides might in some cases, but I don't think that welterweight is really a money division as far as the belt goes right now. So yeah, I wouldn't mind that Edwards fight.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind that either. Actually, that's a good call. I think that's really solid there. Of course, we heard Dana White's comments on at the post fight presser. Pretty much reading between the lines was pretty easy. I mean, even the ESPN post fight shows, those talking head guys that I should be more familiar with, but I only follow MMA. Even they were like, "Well, sounds like Dana doesn't want to keep Woodley around." Do you think he still pursues elsewhere, or do you have any bets where you would favor if you had to put a line on that?
Ooh, in terms of Woodley's future, it seems like he wants to fight, and especially given the performance that we saw last night. If Woodley wants to come out and fight like that, I'll definitely watch him. I'm not sure how much this result will dissuade him from that in the future. But we'll see. But yeah, I'll absolutely, if he goes over to Bellator or PFL, make $1 million beating up, I don't know who in the PFL's welterweight division.
I could actually see that, especially if, hey man, I mean, I'm not trying to put the guy on blast or anything. I think these are things that are pretty public, but I think he went through a divorce and some alimony payments. He's making a certain amount of money, investing. Money's going all over the place. So hopefully he's being smart with it. We joke, I want the best for Woodley. I want the best for these fighters, especially financially. They have enough against them. Woodley does seem smart in a lot of areas, so hopefully he's being really smart with his money as far as that goes. Before we push on to Tomas Tominas Almeida versus Sean O'Malley, I just want to say Steve Gregory says, loving Brad's Downtown Abbey cardigan. What a cad. And Brad, before you answer him, I just want to say that's perfect. He's sipping on a beer. He's got glasses. He's got a cardigan. Whereas me, I'm like just sipping on coffee with a shirt of a sexual predator of the shower room prisons over here. That kind of explains a lot of the mood of the show, right? But yeah, Brad, thank you for really pointing out the contrast between us here.
You know what, Dan? It's the lack of respect that hurts the most. That's what hurts the most. I mean, the other thing, that hurts the most. but the lack of respect, it hurts the second most.
Squirrel Master. Watch out, Squirrel Master. Oh my God. And then before we move on, also just want to shout out my man, Matthew Wells. Mr. Wells Art on Twitter, I believe. Matt's the man. What up, Dan Tom? Out of all the improvements on display from Francis last night, which impressed you and Brad the most? I know we talked about a lot of those, but if we had to say the most, I'll let you go first, Brad.
Honestly, it has to be the grappling side of things. And maybe it's a little bit of that he caught Stipe off guard with it. But the fact, if that guy can even dedicate himself a little bit to sort of basic wrestling, you don't need to be a great technical wrestler at heavyweight. I mean, Alistair Overeem's essentially been a wrestler for years at heavyweight without any real semblance of a technical wrestling game, just having strength and being able to know some angles to trip guys down. If Ngannou can do that, like come the next Derek Lewis fight, it'll probably be a wrestling clinic. But that definitely impressed me the most as far as his progression goes.
Awesome. I'm going to keep pushing down through the card, and we will round back if we have to on these questions, because I get sidetracked enough. And even with my man Brad here, I think we'll just end up talking about, shower room stuff and shower room talk. And we know that I have enough reason to get canceled these days. So, no. But in all seriousness, I think what happened actually in my notes before this fight, between these two fights, before we got to the co-main event, I wrote Death Race 2000, because I tweeted they did a cutaway to all the celebrities that they kept hinting to about the hottest ticket in town, and like it was weird, right? Like I don't know if you saw that cutaway, but like they went to like someone in like Megan Fox and like the dude that Machine Gun Kelly. I'm old, I don't know these people, I don't realize that. I had to have my girl tell me that, oh yeah, that's the same guy that Stipe Miocic comes out to the song. I'm like, well, that kind of makes sense. But then the next group of like Khloe Kardashian and Travis, did they do like a lollipop thing at the same time? And they were like. And I was like, what the fuck is this? It feels like Death Race 2000. Do you get that reference, Brad? That old Stallone movie?
I believe it was Kourtney Kardashian, first of all, Dan. Let's come on.
I'm old. I'm a zoomer. I'm a boomer.
Yeah. Obviously, you're not watching the last season of Keeping Up with the Kardashians. But yeah, that was... I didn't understand the point of that, but, that's an old UFC staple of... Look at us, Chuck Zito's in the crowd. We made the big time, baby.
Right. And I don't know if you saw the other week when everybody was celebrating the UFC 33 anniversary. When I was like, when people forget, like, that's like Dana White even says some stuff like that. That's the worst card ever. So I did I did their failed first attempt where like you see the cameraman trying to bribe, literally like almost like bribe Carmen Electra and Dave Navarro to like say, and she goes, what? The fight wasn't big. Yeah, and she goes, I'm sorry, the fight wasn't that good, and they're like quickly cutting away, cut. And that's still up on Fight Pass, by the way, folks, if you want to go see that reference. But Death Race 2000, they did a remake that I didn't watch, but it's like an old school movie from '75. I think Sly Stallone was like fresh out of doing porn, right? Like, I don't know, things got pretty creepy with me and Mickey. I'm not talking about that, Sly. But like this is like early Stallone, right? And like everyone had their gimmick, and it was just if you like that tweet, I'm guessing you watched yourself some Death Race 2000 because it had some strong Death Race 2000 vibes, which is like this whole pandemic year, I guess, right?
The remake with Jason Statham is like predictably horrible, but in an entertaining way. So, you can check that too.
Well, hopefully they did cool character intros like they did for the Celebs Table side. But right before that happened, we saw Thomas O'Malley defeat... Thomas O'Malley. Wow. Sean O'Malley defeat Thomas Almeida. KO punch.
Roll with it.
I'll be honest. I sprinkled. I did one of those hedge things here where my pick was O'Malley by KO, so I played that at a decent number, and then I did one of those things where I took smaller sprinkles and I just put it on the money line with Almeida, which was nice and inflated by Fight Day, and a little bit on round 3, the round he fell. So I don't know if I ended up like 0.02 over. I can't count it. I think it was pretty much a wash with the way that went. But how did you call this fight, Brad? How did you see it playing out? Did it play out to how you expected it?
I thought the most likely outcome was that Omuki would be able to pick him off early because obviously maybe not the cleaner striker, but definitely the better range striker of the two. Almeida really needs to get inside to do his damage and have sustained exchanges so that he can get to the body and mix up the levels as he does and land his little like T-Rex right hook. Yeah, I wasn't shocked by how it went, but it wasn't the outcome I was hoping for. We'll say that.
Yeah, and I will say, for people like yourself that say I don't pat myself on the back enough, I will say again, similar to I pointed out, against certain threats, guys switching southpaw and calling for that. I did call for O'Malley to go back to his southpaw stance for this fight, which he did, and you can always tell when and this was probably a super more technical one, so I'm definitely not gonna take a shot here, but like I think it was like DC. It might have been. I don't think it was Joe. I think it was DC. It was like, why isn't he throwing the right hand that he did against Wineland? And I just want to be like, well, the last fight against a southpaw, we saw how terrible he does against southpaws, and really in all his fights, win or lose, he's getting hit with left hands in general. So for the fact that O'Malley was just spamming left-sided attacks, I was like, I'm not a fan of the guy, but I'm that tells me that he or someone in his camp's doing their homework. So say what you will. We can still fade that his body might not hold up. I've been one of those putting that narrative out there as far as these taller guys when they're cutting massive amounts of weight. Like I don't know how much longer Montel Jackson. He looked great last time, but I don't know how long he can last in fights with that frame. So there's still that, but I got to give credit where credit's due. They seem like they did their homework for Almeida.
Absolutely, but. Man, I still feel like this guy is just going to get in his own way time after time.
Totally.
Whether it's, trying to do the walk-off KO thing to look cool when obviously he hit Almeida, but as soon as Almeida had the opportunity to stand up, he stood right back up. Like he was nowhere near out of that fight. So, speaking of tripping over himself, I think those legs are still very much an issue. And even more than the physical side of things, he seems just sort of have that pause in there whenever anyone attacks the legs, and it seems to get in his head a little bit, which is a bit concerning.
Totally. And by the way, speaking of the walk-off, which will parlay into our thoughts on the stoppage and the refereeing here, is that I'm much more forgivable, and I'm sure you are too, Brad, to a short, stout guy like Mark Hunt, who's he's a bit portly, and he's doing it because he's trying to save energy and calories. Okay, he needs that energy to like walk around and carry Mark Hunt around. Okay, he doesn't need to be following up punches to the ground. O'Malley was doing it just for IG hits. You know what I'm saying? A lot less sympathy there.
I mean, he's going to get plenty of IG hits of him landing a big punch and then walking away and looking like an idiot. So there's that. But the finish, that was a great coffin nail punch.
It looked brutal. And I will say this, I'm never one to be shy about criticisms to the commission or the refs or taking accountability. And I tweeted this live too. I don't feel like you should condemn Mark Smith for that one. That was a really tough call because if you look at the replay, like he's looking up, he could be doing that thing where he's trying to recover and BS and say, come into my guard to buy time, which guys do, especially if they get hit to the body or something. It's a smart thing to do. But he was out of it, and there's no way, that was a complete hindsight 2020 moment. Like there's no way he could have been able to tell that in real time. So it looked really bad. And if anybody, to be blamed for that situation, it's actually kind of O'Malley, is because when you do that, when you run the risk, is not only do you run the risk of not getting the stoppage for the walk-off like happened in the first round, I believe, for O'Malley, but as I always say, overcorrecting the steering wheel, everybody does it, and you see it especially with officials or judges. They turn in a suspect scorecard or they have a suspect performance, they'll overcorrect it the other way. And another thing judges like to do is they like to assert power. And, we give Mark Goddard crap for going, this is my octagon, this is mine. But, you hear from, I think I heard Dan Hardy, shouts to Submission Radio, did an interview with Dan Hardy where, Mark Goddard takes, when he feels like a fighter takes an extra punch, he doesn't do it publicly, but he takes it hard, man, because he lives and dies by that. So I have no issue from that aspect. However, I believe it was Mertzalayev or whatever, that really bad Herb Dean stoppage in Russia a few years ago, which was, I think, number one for my worst, fights that should have been stopped sooner. I don't think it was like a walk-off, but I think it was a case of a fighter trying to call their own fight, and refs don't like that shit. And if you do that, and the ref is not having it, that ref is going to make, and for arguably good reason, the booth was bringing up this while they're commentating the fight, the argument on why you need to follow up. But they're gonna really overemphasize and overcorrect the steering wheel, and unfortunately, it's at the expense. The lesson is at the expense of the guy who's already been concussed this whole damn time since round one, which was Tomas Almeida. So I hope he's all right. But that's my thought on the ref stoppage. I don't think you should blame the ref there.
No, and especially because the punch that dropped him in that one was in like a really sneaky sort of in tight exchange. So the way he sort of fell out and rolled to his back, it could have been them tripping over each other's feet or something like that. So I don't think you can give him too much shit on that one.
Or tripping over the ref like we saw in another fight where the ref got the foot sweep. Did you see that? He scored the foot sweep.
No, which fight was that?
It was Azatar, I think, where it looks like he went limp, but he went down to get his mouthpiece, and the other fighter swings, and then the ref's foot's behind him, so he goes down to get his mouthpiece, and he's like tripoded, and then he falls straight back. Weird. It was almost like the bully trick where like you squat down behind the guy, and your friend pushes the friend over, and they fall over. Like it was essentially that. So like the ref again overcorrecting the steering wheel, kind of jumping to the Azatar fight really quick. He and correct me if I'm wrong in the comments if that's not the fight, but yeah, I think he even like stopped it to give him his mouthpiece back mid ground and pound or something. If I'm thinking of the same fight, and then allowed him to take the ground. And we'll definitely get to our thoughts on the Azatar fight. But again, it was over. There definitely could have been. I don't want to get killed in Morocco to stop this Azatar fight, but there was definitely overcorrecting the steering wheel where like I think it was Villel was like, well, I just tripped this guy. Like I partially knocked him down. I scored my first UFC knockdown as the ref. I need to give him a little more slack now. Overcorrecting the steering wheel.
Yeah. We'll get to that fight, but I don't think I've ever seen somebody look like they got knocked out by trying to bend over and pick up their mouthpiece before, though. That dude was so tired. Starch, folks. It's not good for the cardio. You got to stay away from the potatoes.
I'm telling you, potatoes. Well, there'll be more potato talk soon. Potatoes. But how about Miranda Maverick defeating Gillian Robertson? I can't remember what your pick. I did listen to your guys' podcast this week. I can't remember what your pick was. Again, I'll allow you to set it up, Brad. Tee it up. What did you think going in, and what was your feelings going out?
Picked Maverick. Didn't really like it for a play or anything like that. But then, as I always do, I don't love putting out my plays like a day in advance or anything like that, because most of the time I want to see where the line moves. And the line on this one got down to minus 145 right before fight time.
Yeah, that's right.
And I ended up taking Maverick just because she had those physical advantages over Robertson, and that seems to be Robertson's kryptonite.
Yeah, I completely agree. You're right. I remember that post because I was jealous. As I ranted on my show and every show, this was another case of like not as egregious, obviously, or a big of a swing, but the Alexander Romanov versus Florida. I fall into submission. Roger DeLima, yeah, that's it. I'm gonna sing that song again. But it's the things where they see where the MMA gamblers and analysts are on. They realize they effed up. COVID saves their butt, and then when they rebook the fight, they get to rebook the line, and all of a sudden, it reflects what the public that you should be respecting of betting public wise thought of the fight, right? So that kind of turned me off because I was originally on a Maverick at like minus 135, but then when it got to
I'm just
minus, you're good, you're all good.
Connection seems to be bad.
Hey, all good. Then it got to like minus 160, and I was like, it wasn't going anywhere. So I didn't play it at the time of the podcast, so it wasn't on my official plays. But you guys, as I told you guys, I was high on Maverick. Did the scouting report for my man Dan Stupp, and I did end up laying it. But what upsets me is that I laid the 160 chalk, for 1.63, and literally like 20 minutes later, the line fucking plummets. I see you posting that you got it for minus 140. I'm like, that's what I was waiting for. Either way, it cashed. But and by the way, I took that cash and I doubled up, even though I was still waiting for a parlay to hit. My parlays have been really bad. But I actually doubled up on Luque because the line went down to minus 185, so I took those winnings, and I made out good. It made up for my Azatar flop, which we'll get to. But yeah, that Maverick line drop was nice. I missed it, but still cashed, and I think she showed a lot of those things that you said, and we both said ahead of it. As far as her making smart positional choices, the athleticism being the difference, and just that staying power. I love Jillian Robertson, but the fight at a certain point, she starts kind of faltering and fading. So if you're going to bet Robertson, I don't blame you taking the dog shots, but maybe you might want to take him to round 1 or submission props if you're looking to bet her.
Yeah, and I think once we talked a little bit about this on Twitter, I think, but yes, the choices overall are pretty good, but I'm not sure about sustaining that grappling exchange in round 3, although eventually she got the best of it. But I think there was a safer way for her to win that fight in that 3rd round. Although apparently she didn't need to, because there were 2 30-27s in there, which was absurd. Yeah,
it was a thing. Here's the thing. It was again, it's kind of overcooking the steering wheel. I believe my man Sean Sheehan, did a reminder as to why. And I'm sympathetic to the 30-27, but not for the reason, Brad, that I saw people giving the 30-27 for. It's because of that Jillian Robertson, again, I'm somebody who actually awards advancements in submission attempts, even if they fail for 1. And for 2, as I keep referencing that Vieta Kunitskaya, like Vieira had just as much, but even I would argue more control. And there was literally like 2 out of like 3 or 4 that landed elbows at the end, but one of them cut Vieira. So Kunitskaya literally won off of that. And we're seeing rounds, again, I'm not going to die on the scorecard either of Delete Giles, but just by swinging back when you're in a submission makes the goddamn round close now. So the fact that you have that, you have the judges, A, overcorrecting that, right? But B, Maverick did the exact same thing, and I'll actually, give love to McGregor here. I know people like to hate on him, but you see it in the Mendez fight, where as soon as a fighter puts down the pack, that's when you need to pick up the pack, right? I talked about this with Usman as well, and Trevor Whitman, how Whitman's molding him more into a pace fighter. And you see that there. As soon as Maverick breaks off, and it was still smart choices, even though she's in bad positions. As soon as she breaks off, she starts unloading, and she had way more sustained time than Vieta had on Kunitskaya.
Yes.
Like almost 30 seconds. And she didn't cut Robertson open, like superficial damage, which I know, Brad, me and you are on the same page for. We don't overcorrect the steering wheel on that, like most tend to. But Robertson actually really looked hurt. She didn't get a drop, but she looked legitimately hurt. And if I'm reading that fight, that's a very subjective thing to do. However, if we're rewarding damage and who hurt more, who got close to getting someone out of the round, I feel like she could have overwhelmed her like that French karate kickboxing girl. It was looking like she was going to get her out of there. So I'm sympathetic to the 30-27 for that reason, but I didn't see that so much emphasized by a lot of the people giving the 30-27.
I don't have to say I don't hate it, because I did sneak in a little Maverick 3.5 point handicap bet, so I didn't think that cashed, and then I heard the scorecards and added a little bit extra to the bank account.
Nice. Okay, yeah, you definitely ain't hating that one. By the way, I forgot to mention this for the shoot box for the Thomas Almeida camp, but dude, did he? I'm asking my fellow Jewish brethren here, but like, even the person I was with was like, did Rogan just call Thomas Almeida's camp a death camp? Like, did he use that as a descriptor? It's like, the shoot box is a death camp. And I'm like, Rogan, easy, Rogan, easy. There's probably a better descriptor for that. Let's not go down that road. A lot of people in MMA have been getting in trouble for making these comparisons. Let's not do that, please.
You might have to go across the Argentina border with Brazil to find those.
Holy shit, Jesus! Were you on a call? Did you catch that? By the way, am I alone? Did anybody in the chat can weigh in if they heard that too? The death camp.
I did not hear that, but it doesn't shock me at all.
Like, obviously, Rogan didn't mean it in a mean way, folks. I'm not trying to get him canceled or anything, and then like that. But it just certainly caught my ear. Jeez.
Yeah.
All right. Let me keep moving. Now we'll get to your comments here, folks. You can keep adding them in the chat. I just want to at least get to this main card, and then we'll catch up on some of these, because we had some Jamie Malarkey comments as well. My man Mark Fellows from Australia. Of course, we joked about, Anik putting the Boston twang, but of course Malarkey is from Australia. I still think that he might be Ted Danson's Australian bastard son, but I think Ted Danson's going to be gonna start answering those phone calls finally now. Then Malarkey gets a performance bonus in his first UFC win. Brad, what did you think about Kama Worthy versus Jamie Malarkey?
I think that, especially with Joe Biden in office now, I mean, you gotta love all that malarkey that's happening. But Kama Worthy is, I'm trying to be positive because I'm on your podcast, and usually I like to criticize, but Kama Worthy's one of those guys that he's in the UFC because of COVID. If it wasn't for COVID, he wouldn't be in here. He really shouldn't be on a pay-per-view main card. Neither should Jamie Malarkey, mind you. But he's just, throughout his career, been a very susceptible fighter to getting finished, and actually one of the rare guys who gets more dangerous in his own finishing potential the further a fight gets, but very susceptible early on. So that the whole performance didn't really shock me. My initial lean was Malarkey by decision because he's shown his wrestling a bit in his previous UFC fights, but just with the opponent that was in front of him, I thought there was a good potential for Malarkey to get a finish in this one.
Yeah, like I picked Worthy, but this was dogger pass for me all over it. Like, if you were gonna play it, I think I even sprinkled a little bit on Worthy, but I didn't see that KO. I thought the left hook was gonna be live going the other way, so I was doubly wrong. So I'm very happy for Malarkey, despite my Ted Danson joke that I won't get away. But he's got that forehead, right? That forehead and brow. Like, I bet you Ted Danson could take some punches. Cheers, right? Huh? But anyways,
absolutely.
But no, I was happy.
Renaissance for Ted Danson in the past decade too.
I know, right?
The man's doing work.
What was that Family Guy joke where someone forgot their umbrella, so they brought Ted Danson and they just stood under his brow bone for shelter? It was. Sorry.
I think that. I mean, you don't need to go any further than that. That's the joke.
Yep. Speaking of jokes, Stephen Gregory. This is not a joke though. He says this Sunday recap is great. Hope it becomes a regular fixture. Don't tempt us, but yeah, I'm gonna try to do it more. And I know I don't want to speak for Brad on air. You can weigh in, Brad, but I know you said, if you're free and the weather's not, not amazing, then maybe this won't be the first time you pop on with me.
Yeah, you might even catch me out in the backyard with a beer on the patio recording this, so I wouldn't be opposed to that either.
Dude, I want to grab one now. I got some sweet plate lunch waiting for me. Not that I need it. I should probably stick it to my green smoothie. Neither here nor there. Daniel May says, if late career Woodley decides he's gonna swing like a nutter, I'm here for it. I'm here for it too, Daniel Mays. If he's gonna, absolutely. I mean, you know what I'm saying? It'll only increase his stock. I mean, on a losing streak, he's still gonna get work out there. You know what I'm saying? So, hey man, go get it, Woodley. If that's what you want, if you're healthy, your business is your business. Daniel Mays also says, for real though, massive respect to Woodley for realizing he had to go for it even though he spent his entire career going backwards. That's right. Luque was probably the worst guy to try that verse though. That's also right.
But at the same time, going backwards against a guy like Luque that's just going to keep putting volume on you is my bet in that fight was Luque, the points handicap. I love me some points handicaps in the appropriate matchups, but that was almost even money for the Luque minus 3.5. And I just wasn't sure if it was going to be, pour on volume, win 30-27, 30-26, something like that, or like we saw, get the stoppage. And had to sweat it out a bit more than I thought I would with Woodley's performance. But that's he did what he had to do in that fight. It wasn't enough.
That's true. I was jumping all up and down in the bedroom. It was one of those. Something about, laying extra money gets you to react harder to these fights, for better or worse. But Daniel May says Raccoon gets murked in the rematch, in my opinion. I mean, wow. What do you think, Brad? I mean, Woodley, is it Woodley versus the Raccoon, or is it what's left of Woodley's hog versus the Raccoon?
Well, Woodley's going in there with an advantage in that the Raccoon's going to be looking for something that isn't there. So Woodley's going to be able to pull the deception angle, and maybe this time he can get the better of the Raccoon. So I think Woodley takes the rematch.
I'm really trying hard to not make shouts to my guy Nick Newell there. But as listen, hey, listen. If anyone's gonna make use of that thing, it's gonna be Woodley, right? I mean, I gotta imagine it still packs some power and all that. So. I'm here for late career Woodley. I hope he doesn't get any more tussles with the raccoon. But if he does, he's going to have to get unorthodox with his attacks. I'm getting canceled. God damn it. I got
nothing.
I'm getting canceled for that. I'm sorry. Let's move on. Let's move on. I don't know, man. I feel like for sidebar, I actually did a write up on Nick Newell and talked to him for a bit for an article that I was doing, and it was like all positive article and whatnot and this and that. I feel like I'm a pretty nice guy, but I was like, I don't think that guy likes me. Even though it was a very not fluff piece, but it was a very positive piece. But I don't know. He seems like a guy that you don't want to get on the wrong side of. So much love, Nick.
How could anyone not like you, Dan?
I don't know. But I got love for Nick Newell and hope he's doing well. I'm not sure what he's doing right now. MMA KO says sorry, lost on it. It's brutal. It's a bad business decision. Sean O'Malley trying to walk off in round 1. People agreeing that the walk-off, I guess, was not good. I think Brian Barberina may have been the closest to finishing Luque. Wow, actually, yeah, that is true. Brian Barberina came closest, right? I said Woodley was earlier. Good correction there. Shapiro?
Yep. Luque was in a ton of trouble in that fight. So
I completely forgot about that.
And he was going to lose the decision in that one, I think, if he didn't get the stoppage with 6 seconds left or whatever it was.
Yeah, definitely. MMA KO says, I still can't believe Mike Perry survived that Luque knee and guillotine. Yeah, that was really brutal. That nose when he came up was just like, yeah, Luque's a violence master for sure, man.
Mm-hmm. And we've forgotten about the submission game. So that was a good reminder of it last night because initially when he came into the UFC, that was his A game, was a submission game, and the striking was still developing. And now it's sort of flip-flopped in terms of people's perceptions anyway.
All right. Yep, it did. It has. Yep, Dark Sky all the way. And then lastly, before we push on and blow through the prelims to get out of here, Daniel May says, O'Malley trying and failing to walk off twice was hysterical. So yeah, more agreements there. I don't think he finds. I'm sure he'll put the O'Malley spin on it. But yeah, hopefully he learned that lesson from that.
I think O'Malley trying to walk off is like when he's got his girlfriend with one of the other guys and he's just in the corner trying to finish, but he can't quite figure it out.
By the way, as I'm still beating myself up for throwing an MMA fighter under the bus for that Nick Newell joke, I should have just done John Bobbitt because that would have been completely in line with Dan Tom's out-of-date references from the 90s, right?
I like that you blew past my Sean O'Malley cuckold joke.
I'm sorry. Jesus Christ. We're all over the place here, folks. God damn. There was
I'll blame it on the connection. Goddamn Canadian internet.
Hey, well, I'll segue off of that for you, Brad. Speaking of some cuckold energy, we got Alonzo Menafield getting business done real fast against the Water Buffalo, which is add that to the nicknames. But yeah, man, Menafield. I was just talking about someone was talking about Oleg Zajuk, which we'll get to, him throwing body shots and tiring him, him nailing OSP with body shots, but him getting tired from it. And I'm like, that's some real Bishop from the X-Men shit, that OSP pulled on from him. He just absorbed his attack. And then maybe that Bishop reference was apropos because later Menafield chose to absorb some stuff from OSP after losing to him. He's coming out here and Von Pruin dudes. What did you think of that, dude?
Apparently you can learn MMA through osmosis. People always say, you don't have to, just because you're in the same room with a guy doesn't mean you're that guy. But Menafield was in the same cage as OSP, and apparently now he's OSP. But huge physical disparity in that fight. And I wouldn't say I was high on Charant. But I've seen him in LFA. He in his last fight, it was 6 weeks ago, he went 5 rounds with Myron Dennis in a striking battle. Who's Myron Dennis isn't great, but he's fought in some K1 or Glory undercards, stuff like that. And so capable striker, and Charant won a 25-minute striking battle with him. So I definitely thought he was live in this one, and Menafield just absolutely smashed him.
Yeah, I was scared. I got scared away from Menafield. I know shots to my man Aaron, who was proven right. That was his favorite parlay piece. Whereas mine was Luque, but he was proven right there. But I got scared away, so I didn't make anything off this one. But I did pick obviously Menafield. But yes, I too thought Charant was live just from the the LFA experience alone and what he was able to show over the course of rounds, which has been the criticism of Menafield, right? But Menafield gets it done quickly, and we're stuck being thought of what could have been, Brad, if we had Thick Willie. I mean, you think Rogan was as disappointed as us that he couldn't go into his playbook?
You know what? I think Rogan is so oblivious to the fights that are happening on the card that he doesn't even know what happened. He doesn't even know what he missed, and now he's not going to get to call a Thick Willie fight because that would have been a dream come true for him.
I mean, yeah, dude. I mean, even me, like, I know I'm grateful and stuff, but like, I don't know. I know people like are really like big about getting tweets on the broadcast, whereas I'm like, whatever. Like, this was a night where I actually wanted to get my tweet on the broadcast because I wanted to get a Thick Willie one on there just for you guys, for all the believers, all the supporters of the thickness, to get that representation immortalized, right?
It's spreading though. It's spreading. It's a grassroots movement. The Thick Willie movement is really grassroots, and it's going to take over. We've got that bottom up approach at the MMA analysis.
Yep, and you got people like me and Aaron Bronstetter doing your guys' Lord's work for you, getting in the ear of Thick Willie's manager Tyson Chartier. So I would love to see that conversation of like Tyson trying to pitch to William Knight to say, hey, this I know you really like Nightmare, but hear me out for a second.
I hope so. I would love to see it. But then you would have Buffer probably blow it in the introductions by being like William Thick Knight instead of Thick Willie Knight,
Yes, totally.
Although I think Buffer might be a confirmed MMA analysis listener because when he was reading the scorecards for our 2 fights from what we're going to talk about, he threw a little Bukaka in there.
Oh, he did. Yeah, that's right. Maybe he is. Buff's low key, man. Buff's low key. But in the next fight, as we kind of blow through these, we'll try to keep this under the 2-hour mark today. But I'm glad you guys are enjoying it. Keep feeding stuff in the chat. Burgundy will read it, and I will get off track. But Abubakar, which everyone was having a giggle listening to DC now pronounce the name, but Abubakar Nurmagomedov defeated Jared Gooden by unanimous decision and really leaned on his striking, man, and looked good. Even was able to hurt Gooden, who is pretty durable, at least at this weight. He's a big welterweight, and he got it done. I was scared away, to be honest, from Nurmagomedov, although I picked him. But yeah, I think it was a good performance for him.
I was on Gooden here. I picked him, but as the week went on, became less and less confident, and eventually the bet that I played was Gooden scorecards gets canceled. One of those little prop bets that some of the houses offer. So I ended up lucking out on this one because bet got canceled when it went to decision, even though it was very close to not going to decision. However, if Abubakar got that first round stoppage, that would have been incredible because I had a little conspiracy theory parlay going on that they sent the potatoes to the wrong hotel room. They sent them to Abubakar's room instead of Abu's room. And that's why Barry Yu got the third round stoppage, and I thought he was going to get the first round, but wasn't meant to be. Sadly,
that is great. Oh, that is great. Oh, that's great. Steve Gregory says, Thick Willie is a grass-stained movement. Oh, I'm sorry. That is great. I had to pause for that. I'm sorry. That's I always got to pause for Steve or if there's something Thick Willie. Next fight, Mikhail Lord Oleksiejczuk got the split decision over what's his name? How do you pronounce it, Brad?
It's Manas Bukaki.
Yes, the Lithuanian legend himself. Who did he fought his way back in like I thought perhaps he could have, but I felt like I think part of me was going to lay the under, and part of me was like, oh, I should have laid the under. There's no way this fight's like. Look how gassed Mikhail looks in the first round, and somehow he comes away with the split. I was a bit in transition, so I'm an unreliable narrator here. What was your take on this fight going in and coming out, Brad?
Liked the under as well. I did end up playing it. Didn't make a difference because the other leg wouldn't have cashed either. It was the O'Malley Almeida under. So I had the two fights where guys were bombing on each other and didn't manage to get it done in under 12 and a half. But yeah, I thought this was going to be a fun fight, which obviously it was, just because that's Oleksiejczuk's style. But he definitely held up a little bit better than I thought he did. Personally, I didn't think he actually won the fight. I scored it 29-28 for Bukaka, as Buffer announced. But I can't really have any problem with the scorecard either way. First was Bukakis, because that's the round where he actually hurt him pretty good and almost got him out of there. And if you want to give second and third to Oleksiejczuk, you can't be mad at that one. The Candy Man, as we like to call him.
The Candy Man. Yeah, man, the Candy Man can, and he moved forward to kind of counteract some of the bad body language that he was giving off, and I guess he gets it done. Yeah, the line expanded. I thought it was going to contract from weigh-ins, but it didn't, so I actually ended up staying away. I didn't play him, so otherwise, I guess I would have squeaked one out there, but grats if you did.
He did not look great at weigh-ins.
No.
That is certain.
No, yeah, but the money went opposite, which is really weird. Yep. But the next fight, we had Omar, who got my the Sanford MMA parlay, the Omar Vicente parlay, Omar Luque parlay, I should say, he beats Shane Young by unanimous decision. Was a little worried because Shane Young came in and looked like he got the bag of potatoes, Brad, but
he had. Anytime you see the armpit veins, that little vein going over the armpits, that's a sign that a fighter is well.
You know what I loved is that, and you guys will use that terminology of the yams, which actually has some scientific rooting to these code shade that we throw, but it's almost just the Azatars have no, as we're like, I love how every fight segues to the Azatars criminal behavior, but I don't know, this is how it's done, but it almost feels like he was an extra FU going they were potatoes, the fact that everybody was saying steroids and he goes, they were just potatoes, yeah, or yams that turn into steroids, okay.
Yeah. Gotta get those Brazilian mountain yams,
Or the Moroccan ones, man. Apparently, those are putting out some RPMs. Not for Abu. I guess we should just jump to that. I cashed a bet on Omar, and I don't have much to say on this fight. I was kind of loosely watching too, despite betting on it.
There wasn't a lot that happened.
Okay, yeah, I did see one nice exchange, by the way. Omar did was smart when Shane Young went to counter him with the heel hook, and he did something really smart. He did the Irish collar to deny leverage of the leg lock. That's my favorite way to defend a leg lock. I don't try to spin out. I'll usually kind of smash in, and you grab their head leverage, and they can't spin the way they need to attack. It's great. But yeah, that's all I got to say about that. Marc-Andre Barriault, as Brad said, I started this fight eating crap, and I'll end eating crap here. I played Abu for the value because he opened as a slight favorite and went to dog odds. So I'm like, I'll take the plus money on what should be a nail biter and a guy who's connected if this thing can get to the scorecards. But despite Jaron Vallel trying his hardest, and apparently, according to commentary, which is you don't hear them note often, much less the refs do, apologizing to the corner. Yeah, I don't know, man. There was I don't want to take anything away from Barriault. Did you? I think you cashed on this, Brad. Set it up, man. How did you see it coming? And were you surprised that the criminal mastermind could not find a way to win?
I'm surprised that Jaron Vallel is still around, because that was about as bad as you could possibly handle that fight. There were so many opportunities for him to stop that fight, and I know that time isn't supposed to matter to referees. You're supposed to ref the fight however it's going. But even at the end, the 10-second clap hit. He acknowledged it, sort of like waved to the timekeeper when it hit, and then proceeded to stop the fight when there was some ground and pound that was no different than the stuff that had been landed for the previous 4 minutes was happening. So that was very strange. But in terms of the bet, I didn't end up betting Barrios straight because I wasn't shocked that Abu was able to come out early and he looked pretty good. Looked like he had some energy, but that's a guy that throughout his career has just not fought good competition. And even against some of those guys, he's gone to a lot of decisions. He starts to look pretty rough once you get into the second and third round. So none of that surprised me. And Barrio is just incredibly durable. I think the simple fact that he's Canadian made me shy away from betting him straight. But we got a little bit of the round 3 prop, which was
nice.
So.
You are a marksman with those round 3 props, and yeah, man. That was a total one where I think it was at Feetwork, Manos de Piedra on Twitter. Shouts to that guy. He called me out justifiably so, man. I called myself out here. It's like, he wasn't doing it meanly, by the way, but I'm just saying, like, man, I always go for, like, the grindy guys who haven't been stopped over, like, the athletic burst guys. Like, that's my MO. I don't know what's been wrong with me these past couple weeks. It worked out in the main event. Sure, the card we're covering, but like I don't know what's wrong with it. It's total out of characteristic. I'm like, why did I bet this? This is exactly the way it was gonna go. And the crazy thing was like, the thing with Azatar, he did everything you could want him to do though. Like he was trying to pace himself, right? Like he was doing the clinch work, maybe a little bit too much for takedowns, which is I guess I didn't answer Matt Wells' question. I agree with you. Ngannou's wrestling also impressed me the most, Brad, but it was the fact that he knew when to disengage. He listened to the corner when he went for the takedown, and then you're like, oh no, this could be bad, and he disengaged, right? Like that was impressive to me because we saw Azatar, who actually has more wrestling experience than Ngannou. I didn't hate the clinch warfare and the body and the leg work, but he was still having to, Barrial was making him fight there and re-swim for underhooks and turn, and his corner knew that, which is why they wanted him to get away from it, and Azatar didn't listen. But outside of that, like, he did everything he wanted. He was doing, like I said, the measuring attacks to the leg and really doing visual damage. Like, he was going to the body to try to equalize the gas tank from the get-go, consistently working the body, using it to build up high, and hurting Barrial more than I've ever seen him hurt in the UFC or the TKO scene, by the way. So it was like, Azatar did everything you could have wanted him to do, another one of those cases, but it just wasn't enough, and that round 3, fading the gas tank was where the value was at, so congrats to you on that one.
Fading Canada is never a bad call, though, so I can't blame you on that one. And Azatar has won a bunch of decisions in his career, so...
Yeah, I thought he could survive.
Looking at.
And clearly he thought all he had to do was survive. Like, he was like, you could see him under there, he like going like to Jaron, just let me get to the judges, please. Trust me, I know what I'm doing. Just let it get to the judges, trust me. Like, I could have swore that's what he was saying. Because, Jaron Villel trips him, pauses so he can put the mouthpiece back in to continue getting a beating. And it just should have been stopped. This was Jaron Villel's only assignment, which was weird, but I had a feeling that might have been his only assignment anyways with the way that fight went.
Yes, that's. I hope he doesn't have any trips planned to Morocco because he's not coming back if he does.
Yeah, it was almost like no one wanted to be responsible for, like, someone's like, why didn't the towel throw in? Why didn't this? Why didn't that? I'm like, dude, I don't think anybody wants to be responsible for stopping an Azatar fight and what could happen to you for that. So I don't blame him in that sense. But yeah, it was a really bad look for sure on Villel. And what is up with this? This is like the second card in a row where, like, the first fight, like, it was Bruno Silva, JP Buys. Like, what is it about the first UFC card of the night or fight of the card? Like, we're like, we need to, guys, before you start fighting, can you guys somehow orchestrate every foul possible to demonstrate it so we have talking points for the rest of the night? Because, like, right? Because, like, Bruno Silva used, like, the cage grab, the eye poke, and the groin. He did the trifecta before getting his finish.
Yes.
And then in this fight, you get help from the ref tripping you. The ref is like, like fluffing the guy's cushion under his head so he can take more beatings. Like, it was like 2-on-1 in there.
Yeah, there's hey, always cheat in MMA if you can, but I think we need to come up with a name for what Bruno Silva pulled off. In hockey, they've got the Gordie Howe hat trick. I don't know. In MMA, maybe we need to call it the Gilbert Yvel hat trick.
Oh shit, Gilbert Ivel, that's a shout. That's right. You want to talk? I mean, you want to talk about incorporating the refs physically, right? That is Gilbert Ivel there to a T. Well, that pretty much recaps the card. Any other last comments you guys can get in the chat here? Brad, so UFC 260 overall, I mean, at least entertaining. Obviously, these things are under delivering because of COVID itself, just wiping out all these fights. But your thoughts on the card, I guess, overall?
Vastly exceeded my expectations. You see the best fight by far on a card fall off, and it turns into very much a one fight card. But the fights that were there delivered, and I'm the opposite of one of these. Oh man, these cards that are shitty on paper, they're always the bangers. That is absolutely not the way I look at this stuff. But these fights were entertaining. A lot of them didn't mean anything, but the ones that did delivered, and we got some fun. And honestly, I kind of like when we've got 9 or 10 fight cards and you don't have to watch for 7.5 hours to get your fights in. You can watch everything. I actually went back and watched the main event again this morning because I think that's the first time I've done it in a long time, but I wasn't overwhelmed by the amount of fights like I have been in some weeks recently.
Yeah, I mean, late start time, early finish time was nice this Saturday, right? I mean, we had the later start time because it has to be for main card pay-per-views, but 2 first-round finishes, a third-round finish, and a second-round early finish. I mean, it was a short card, all things considered, especially that we could have been looking at 2 potentially 25-minute affairs on there.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think, actually, I don't want to say that the Volkanovski fight would have definitely gone 25 minutes. But yeah, it could have been one of those, 1:15 finishes, and I think I was in bed by 1:15, so I can't argue with that. I know it's easier for you guys on the West Coast, but East Coast and our European friends, man, it can be rough sometimes on these longer cards.
It can. Shouts to them, absolutely. All our brothers across the pond and sisters across the pond there. Gotta give the ladies some love, of course. Lot more female fans of MMA I keep stumbling upon too, which is great. Let's keep expanding it out there, folks, and so hopefully everyone else will have to step up their game.
Them guys.
Yeah, don't be creepy. They, like a lot of them actually can contribute like some of the funnier jokes on the Twitter space too. So get in there and throw some elbows, ladies. Get in those maybe don't get in the comment sections. Actually, stay away. Stay far away from this sport. I take back everything I just said. What am I doing? This is MMA. You guys shouldn't even be watching this. All right, so before we get out of here, Brad, can you plug your MMA show or anything else you want to plug or say, as we get out? Thank you, of course, for joining me, man.
I appreciate you having me. This was a ton of fun to do on a Sunday. I'm sorry that the connection was a bit spotty on my end, so it seemed like there was a bit of a delay, but we worked through it. MMA analysis is at the MMA dash analysis on Twitter. I don't know. Something like that. Look for us. It's in my Twitter handle, which is at Brazchuck, Z Chuck. Somewhere. Dan's got it written somewhere in here. Follow me there for terrible jokes and worse bets. And I just like to have fun with this, which I know you do, which is why I appreciate you and your work, Dan.
Yeah, thank you. Hopefully you appreciate me too, because folks, keep looking at that at Brazchuck thing, because I spelt it wrong. So it's CHUK, not CHUCK. Hey, at least I didn't put Braz Cuck, and really pulled one on you, Brad. Right? I mean, this was an honest mistake, at least, So
hey, maybe I need to change my Twitter name.
I don't want to give you any ideas. Yes, that's at BRAZCHUK. Just to clarify,
it's actually Z. North of the border, we say it's Z, not Z.
Yeah, I didn't realize that, by the way. I'm so American and like ignorant with tunnel vision. Like, what's the metric system? Who needs this stuff? I don't know. But
Imagine measuring things in values of 10 and hundreds instead of 12.
hey, listen, it goes to show I got to work on my cultural sensitivity amongst many other sensitivities of this show. But hopefully you guys enjoyed and, took the intent for what it's worth, even on the swings and misses, because let's be honest, we could all use more comedy. It's been some crappy things going on in the world. I'm not going to spend more time talking about it here as I have on past shows recently. Not that I regret it, but it's always important to inject comedy in every part of your life, not take things so seriously, which is a big part of the reason why I had my man Brad on here. He always makes me laugh and feel better. Hopefully we were able to give you guys at least something to do, if not give you a couple laughs. Don't take us too seriously. We wish you all the best. Be kind to one another out there, folks. Stop the hate in general. Let's all try to be a little better, myself included. Yeah, stop Asian hate. There we go. But just in general, there's just been really crappy things in the news. Happy Passovers to the brothers and sisters out there. You know I love y'all. But seriously, guys, thank you for everything. I'm not even going to plug the mixedmartialanalyst.com click-throughs. I'll skip the Amazon read-throughs and on it stuff. Of course, you can always support the podcast there. Like this video. Subscribe to Daniel Tom MMA if you're listening to the audio version of Protect Your Neck podcast. Appreciate all the kind stuff. Positive ratings and reviews at the PYN podcast on all social platforms, at Dan Tom MMA on Twitter. And until next time, protect your neck. All right, I lost Brad, and I will see you guys